our YouTube channel, so I apologize for that delay. Again, my name is Maya Luria. I am with TMC for Seniors, and I want to welcome Tiffany Lamb here today. She is with the Office of the Attorney General, and she's got a very important topic to share with us, all about scams and frauds that target older adults. And there are so many of them, so I'm really excited to hear what Tiffany can share with us. So welcome, Tiffany.
Thanks, Maya. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Lamb. I was actually born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. I graduated from the U of A with my degree in public management and an emphasis in criminal justice. So working with the Attorney General's office is kind of a little bit perfect for that. And so I'm a community outreach and education coordinator. What I do primarily is, well, before COVID at least, is that we were traveling the state giving these presentations face to face, talking to the public about the trends and epidemics that we see facing Arizonans. So some other topics that we talk about, for instance, would be the opioid epidemic. And that's something that I'm actually currently working on updating the presentation for, just because with COVID, we did see actually more issues with opioid addiction and people who previously had opioid addictions who were more likely to relapse because of all the stressors that came from COVID-19. And another topic that we talk about is human trafficking. That's another topic that's really important to me, and it's one that I think we need to bring more awareness on, just because a lot of people might assume that it's not something that happens here in Arizona, and they might think it happens just in foreign countries. That's actually not the case, and it is the second largest criminal enterprise next to drugs. And so here in Arizona, the average age that a kid is sex trafficked is actually going to be 14 years old. So that's really young. That's about freshmen in high school. And so that's also a topic that we like to talk about with middle and high school students, although it's not as highly requested, unfortunately. But when we talk to parents, we want to make sure, or grandparents, we want to make sure that they're having those discussions with kids who are in middle school and in high school, just so that they can look for red flags that, potentially there's a human trafficker or cyber predator who's trying to talk to them. Another presentation that we give is on internet safety, and that's one that we probably give the most, and that's usually to younger students. And we do talk about cyber predators in that. Another topic that we talk about is e-cigarettes and vaping. So right now it's about 1 in 20 middle school students are using e-cigarettes, and it's 1 in 5 high school students who use e-cigarettes. So I'm wondering, of those of you in the audience, how many of you actually know someone who vapes? And I guess the scariest part about vaping is that we actually don't know what the long-term effects of vaping is going to be until much later. So of course we don't want it to be our youth who they're having to run those studies on. So there's just a few topics that we talk about. We have other ones. We have a senior abuse presentation. We have a life care planning, and these are all totally free. You can always visit our website. I'll give you a list of our resources at the end of the presentation, and you can always request to have those presented. If you're a part of a community group, kind of like this, you can bring it up, or if you're a part of a church, whatever, any place that you think could benefit from this information. Obviously, today we'll be talking about consumer scams. This is also one that I'm currently working on updating. As you can imagine, working for the government, there is some red tape, so we do have to go through certain levels to have this approved, and it has to go through attorneys so that they're making sure that all of the information that we're providing for you is accurate and as up to date. So unfortunately, we weren't able to have the most updated presentation given quite yet, but I am looking forward to providing that, and I will bring up some of those newer scams that we might see also throughout this presentation. And thank you, Maya. I was just going to ask, so you read that perfectly. Okay, so first we're going to look at Arizona in general. This was information from the 2018 Sentinel report. I just gathered the 2020 Sentinel report, and I believe Arizona ranks 16th now. So we are getting a little bit better. So this was when Arizona was ranked 7th in the nation for fraud. And now the categories that you're seeing on the right side of the page, those are going to be kind of the main ones that we're going to break down throughout this presentation, and I'll go a little bit more in depth with that. The top scam you can see is going to be imposter scams. I guarantee that most, if not all of you, have received this type of scam before, where it's someone claiming to be from Social Security, saying that you have, some sort of red flag that popped up with your number, or it's going to be someone from claiming to be from the IRS because you didn't pay your taxes and you're going to be arrested. So those are definitely going to be really popular scams. The next type of thing that we're going to talk about is identity theft. And Maya, you can go ahead and switch to the next slide. Thanks. Arizona is going to rank 10th in the nation for identity theft. I don't remember what it was for 2020. I think it's a little bit better than that also. However, those are going to be on the right side, the most common types of fraud that you're going to see. Credit card fraud is one that's very popular. There's many ways that these scammers can steal our credit card information. If you guys are buying stuff online and you're not using secure websites, it might make it more likely that there's like a data leak and your card information could potentially, get in the hands of someone who's trying to steal your identity or steal your credit card info in order to make fraudulent purchases. I had that happen with my debit card once, where I had no idea where someone would have gotten that information from. It can also happen at gas stations, for instance. If you're paying with a card and there's a skimmer on the gas pump, then they can steal your information that way. Essentially, it's going to read that information off to them, and they'll gather the numbers, basically, and then use that information, obviously, against you. And you can switch to the next slide. This is who they are going to be targeting in Arizona. These are the top cities that reported theft, or identity theft, and just fraud in general in the state. So Prescott, Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale, Lake Havasu, Sierra Vista, and Tucson. Those are kind of like the most populous cities here, so it kind of makes sense. And I think what's really interesting when I give this presentation is that it's almost primarily going to be for senior communities who are requesting this information. But just from personal experience, from what I've heard from people my age and even younger sometimes, is that they're not as experienced with consumer issues and scams. So they actually are pretty much just as likely, if not more likely, to actually lose money to some sort of fraud because they're not as experienced in those cases. And so I highly encourage you to have a conversation, an open discussion with your loved ones about what you learned today. And it's not just going to be seniors. I encourage you to also talk to your kids or grandkids about it, especially if you know anyone who maybe has their first job and they're just now, introduced into this consumer world, so that they're aware of certain red flags. And I actually had forgot to mention, but I used to work in the consumer protection division of my office. And specifically, I was in the consumer information and complaints department. And so I was actually talking to constituents every day. They would call about certain scams they saw. And so these were primarily people in Arizona who were contacting us, who were trying to file some sort of complaint. And then I would kind of decide whether there were complaints that fell within our jurisdiction or a different agency. And the cool thing about filing complaints with my office is if for whatever reason it's not within our jurisdiction, we'll forward it to the correct agency and then they'll file the complaint on your behalf. So that's why I always encourage people to file a complaint regardless if they think that anything can be done or not, because it doesn't take that long. The consumer complaint process, it doesn't really ask for a lot of information. Other than your contact information, the business or person's contact information who you're filing the complaint against. You'll check some boxes. It'll just ask some questions, and then you'll explain briefly what the complaint is about, and then you can include supporting documents such as receipts, warranties, or any other documents that you might have signed. And so it shouldn't take too long. You can do it online. However, I know a lot of people prefer that we just send them a complaint form in the mail. And if you call our office, we'll do that for free. So we'll send as many complaint forms as you need. And yeah, so as I had mentioned, it's actually going to be younger people who are reporting losing money to fraud more often than older people. And when we see the difference is that it's going to be people who are age 70 and above are going to have a higher median loss versus younger people. So it's younger people who are getting defrauded from scammers more often, but it's people who are older who are losing higher amounts of money. And so again, this is why it's important to talk to literally everyone in every demographic about it, because actually the longer I do this, the more I realize that pretty much everyone I know has been scammed at some point. I even personally myself have lost money to people who were claiming to sell concert tickets off of Craigslist, and then I sent them money through one of the online apps, and then they never sent me the tickets. So there's a lot of different types of scams out there. That's actually one scam that we are including in the new presentation, are those apps where you do send money online. And I think another funny thing is that people my age and younger, I'm 27, and I never have cash on me. I don't know what cash is. And so it always surprises me when people have cash. And so what we do, people my age generally, is that we'll just send people money through one of these apps. There's like Venmo, Cash App, Zelle is another big one too. And so if you go out to dinner, for instance, and one person pays for the entire bill, you'll just Venmo them, however much you owe them instead of giving them the cash. And so we're starting to see more scams on those types of things too. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. Okay, so this is a really important slide. This one is a good one to take a screenshot of maybe, or jot some notes down. These are your basic rules. This is something that I tell everyone. Even we have like a young consumer presentation that we give. That one is almost never requested. I gave it for the first time in person literally last week in Chandler to a community youth group at their community center, and they were so sweet. And I appreciated that they seemed like they were really interested, even though some of them were like in middle school, and I was trying to explain to them what credit was. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're not going to remember this. I don't think I knew what credit was when I was in middle school. But anyways, basic rule of thumb is going to be, is it sounds too good to be true, then guess what? It probably is. One thing that scammers love to do is that they like to prey on our emotions. They're going to use high pressure sales tactics. That means they're going to tell you this is a limited time offer. You must act now or it's going to expire. You're not going to get a better deal than this. And the reason why they do that is because they want you to make those really quick decisions without consulting with your loved ones about whether it's a good idea. They don't want you to do your due diligence and do your research or homework. They want you to make that decision quickly before you find out that, hey, you know what, maybe it's actually not a good idea. So if you ever do feel like you're being pressured for whatever reason, it's best to take a step back. I know we've all probably been in that situation before where maybe we're looking into purchasing something and we're talking to the salesperson, and so we feel obligated to make that purchase because we feel bad for wasting their time or we feel bad for asking questions. Please make sure that you don't feel that way, and that if for whatever reason you see any of these red flags and you do feel pressured, that you just go back home and you do more research on it, and then maybe make sure that you take someone else with you, especially if you're making larger purchases. Another thing to remember is that credit cards are going to be the safest way to pay. The reason for that is because a lot of credit cards are going to have the zero liability for fraudulent charges. And that means that it's going to be easier to dispute those charges that are fraudulent versus other forms of payment. So if you're planning on making a large purchase, make sure that you're using credit cards in the event that you do become a victim of a scam, or if it's a fraudulent purchase because someone stole your information or whatever, you're more likely to see that money back. Other things to remember, make sure that you are guarding your numbers. If you are going to a place where there's public Wi-Fi and you're kind of worried that they probably don't have the best security there, I would steer clear from connecting to it. Also, make sure that you're not oversharing certain details on social media. So the main thing that I tell people of all ages, especially children, but even adults when we give internet safety presentations and the scams presentations, are make sure that you have your social media profiles set to private versus public. So if you have your social media profile set to private, that means that you're having to add people who can see the information that you are willingly posting. If you have your account set to public, that means that literally anyone can click on your profile and see all of that information. And so It's pretty easy to do. You'll go on whatever social media account you have. I'm assuming most of you probably have a Facebook. A lot of people my age have Instagram. So you'll go to like the privacy settings and you'll go to make sure that it's set to private, where you're having to add your friends or followers for them to see what you are posting. And that's actually something that kids kind of struggle with. One thing that I've really recognized with a lot of students is that they would love to be internet famous. It's kind of like a goal of theirs, is to become internet famous. So they like to have their account set to public so they get more followers, more likes, more views, things like that. And so that's another thing that we really emphasize with kids, because we know that there are predators out there who are targeting kids who are their age or even younger sometimes. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up for the scams presentation is that, let's say you are posting something on Facebook for your granddaughter's birthday and you tag her and you include a picture of her. And then now someone could, see that information. They'll see when her birthday is. Maybe they'll click on her profile, get a front-facing picture of her, see where she lives, maybe see her phone number if it's posted on there somewhere. And those are all just personal details that someone can gather from someone. And then that can just leave people more open to becoming victims of identity theft. So it can happen. You might not realize certain details that you're sharing on social media. So again, the best thing that I suggest is to have your account set to private. Shredding your documents. We like to host shred-a-thon events in my office. We do this pretty much about every month now. And they're no contact, so it's, a little bit more safe to do with COVID. And essentially, you'll just bring up to 5 banker's boxes full of your documents if you have any. I highly encourage you not to hoard any documents that have your sensitive information, like your driver's license number, social security number, birthday, full name, things like that. Especially those of you, if you have any businesses or if you know of anyone who has businesses, it's important that they're shredding those documents instead of, just throwing them in the recycle, because people can go through your recycle when it's on the curb and then they'll take your information that way. So you can check our website to see when we have upcoming shred-a-thon events. They're not always held here in the Valley, in the Phoenix area. We were actually just in Sahuarita like last month, and then the month before that, I think we actually were in Marana. So we like to switch it up as much as possible. Now that we're 120 degrees, we're not doing them in southern Arizona. We're actually doing one in Prescott Valley on Saturday. But I encourage you to Google the nearest shred-a-thon by you. So if you just go to Google after this presentation, if you're interested in going to attend one of these shred-a-thon events, they're not always hosted by my office, but there's typically other organizations or businesses who do host them. So just Google shred-a-thon or shred event near me, and that's what you guys can do. Make sure you're also using strong passwords. I know it's kind of tedious, especially with certain sites now. They require you to have X amount of characters with, a number or a special character, and it's kind of a headache to, remember. I keep them on my notes on my phone, or you can just put like a sticky somewhere where people aren't going to get that, and updating those every so often. Making sure that you're checking your bank statements regularly. I find that senior communities are excellent at doing this. When my debit card information was stolen, I didn't realize it was stolen for 2 months because I'd stopped checking my bank statements. And guess what? I don't do that anymore. I check them, weekly. And then also checking your credit report is a good idea. And you can go to the next slide. Thanks. So these are going to be red flags that you could be a victim of identity theft. So if there are withdrawals from your bank account that you cannot explain, if you're not receiving your bank statements or bills in the mail, if you're receiving calls from debt collectors about debts that are not yours, if you find unfamiliar accounts or charges on your credit report, which is why it's important to check your credit report regularly, and if you're getting medical providers bills for services that you didn't use, and then also if the IRS is notifying you that more than one tax return was filed in your name, is going to be one of the biggest red flags. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. These are going to all be what you can do in the event that you are ever the victim of identity theft. I just gave this presentation to a group of seniors in Prescott Valley last week at the police department there. And one of the women there told me that she had her identity stolen a few times, actually. And so these are all things that you can do. You can report it to the Federal Trade Commission. If you've never heard of the Federal Trade Commission, don't worry, most people don't. We are familiar with them in my office because I have to refer back to them to make sure some of this information is still currently up to date. They have wonderful infographics and just information in general if you're ever curious about more consumer related things. They give really good tips and whatnot. So that's the FTC, and I'll provide their resources and stuff at the end also. You can also file a report with your local police department. So you're not going to call the 911 number. You're going to call the non-emergent number for wherever you live. File a report with them. You can also get fraud alerts placed, and then you can call the companies where it occurred. And then you can also correct your credit report, consider adding a credit freeze, closing any new accounts that were open in your name, and removing those charges that you didn't make from your account. And then you can go to the next slide. Thanks. Phone fraud. This all happens to us. I already brought, partially some types of phone fraud that you might get, like the IRS, Social Security scam calls. I get those calls. I used to get those calls actually more frequently before COVID than I do now, I will admit. I always would win a free Marriott stay. I can't tell you how many times I've won a free Marriott stay. So if there's anyone ever calling saying that you won a prize, even though you've never entered a prize, then that's going to be a scam. Again, they're going to rush you to make decisions. They're going to use those high pressure sales tactics. If you ever suspect that it's a scam call, just hang up. If you don't recognize the number and you're not expecting an important phone call, then don't answer. Screen your own calls. That's what I do. I'll essentially let them go to voicemail, and if it's important, they'll leave me a voicemail, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. Otherwise, it might be like a robocaller, and then sometimes those will kind of leave funky voicemail messages for you too, and then you can just block them. That's what I do. If I know that it's a scam call, I'll block the number immediately. So another thing that you have to keep in mind is that you guys have probably received scam calls from numbers that look very similar to your phone number. It could have the same area code and the same 3 first digits from your 7-digit number. That's because they're able to spoof their phone numbers that they're calling from. And that's because they know it's more likely that you'll pick up a phone call from a number that you recognize versus like a 1-800 number or a number that's from out of the country. So they can spoof and clone the numbers that they call from. And you can also ask them questions. I personally tell people not to ask them questions because they can give you false information and confuse you even more and try to convince you that they're not a scammer. Another thing I highly, highly suggest that you guys do if you're constantly receiving these types of calls is that you can call your phone service provider and then ask them what options you have. For instance, sometimes when we call people from my office, our calls are automatically blocked for some reason, so they show up as unknown numbers when we call. There are people who actually have it to where they cannot receive blocked calls. So then I'll have to unblock my office number in order to call them. That's another option that you have. And then they might even have other things that they can provide for you. So call them, tell them you're getting too many scam calls, and ask them what they can do to help lessen some of those. Next slide, please. This is the Do Not Call registry. If you're not already on it, I highly encourage you to do so. Unfortunately, this is not going to help with the scam calls because guess what? Scammers don't listen to the law. This is going to be for sales calls from real businesses and real companies. So let's say you purchased a car from a dealership and they're still calling you about deals and things like that. If you're on the Do Not Call registry, they would be violating that call registry, and it's actually illegal. So then they'll get like a cease and desist letter from us if you file a complaint against them. So this could lead to less calls. But again, if you're on the registry and you're still getting scam calls, that's because they're ignoring the law. Next slide, please. This is going to be the top complaint that we see in my office are going to be auto sales and repairs. And this does actually include rentals now. If you are ever looking to purchase a car or if you need to get repairs for whatever reason, please make sure that you are checking the reviews. That's going to be one thing to really do at the end of the presentation. This is one thing that I really emphasize, throughout the presentation. I'll show you the Better Business Bureau's information at the end. But if you don't already check the Better Business Bureau for your purchases, please make sure that you're doing so now, especially if it's a larger purchase like a car or repairs. I think the reason why we see so many of these complaints is because of how expensive they are. And also because sometimes there are these places that have shady sales tactics. So the way that we work in my office in regards to consumer protection is that, let's say we're getting the same complaint for the same business from a lot of people. That kind of sends a little red flag to us. We'll kind of monitor it and see if we continue to get more of these complaints. If we find that there's a pattern and we think that maybe they're violating the Consumer Fraud Act here in Arizona, we could potentially send one of our agents to that business. They can go undercover, wear a mic, and then see kind of what they're doing. And then sometimes we can take them to court, and then that's when we see litigation happen. So this is why I always encourage people to file complaints, because sometimes there are businesses who do that. We know that. And that's why we see these lawsuits come, in and out of my office. So these complaints are confidential. You can't call our office and see if there's a business that has complaints. It isn't until there is some sort of lawsuit happening that it becomes public information. However, the Better Business Bureau does have their complaints where you can read them and view their ratings and whatnot. So check the Better Business Bureau. Make sure that you're going to a legitimate business. In the event that you have to file a complaint, if it's a business that isn't legit, it's going to be more difficult to get a response from them. So legally, when you file complaints, we cannot force a business or a person to respond to that complaint. But if it's like a legitimate business, then they're probably going to respond. In fact, a lot of these like larger businesses, for instance, will have like a complaints department where they specifically will contact us to respond to those complaints directly. So anyways, back to the auto sale repair fraud. Make sure that you are looking for these warning signs. If you're ever feeling like you're rushed into signing paperwork, if the salesperson is suggesting that you take the vehicle home before financing is approved, and if they're not allowing you to see the parts that need repair. Now, when you're buying a car, make sure that you're researching the value of the car and the history. If it's a used car, you can check the Carfax to make sure that it wasn't an accident and whatnot. Make sure that you're negotiating based on the price of the vehicle, not the monthly payment. That's something I wish I had known when I got my car, because immediately when I got there, they asked me, what do you want your monthly payment to be? Make sure that you are not signing a contract with blank spaces, and then check your financing rates with your own bank first. When you're getting repairs, make sure that you get quotes, because they could potentially throw in an extra repair that you never knew about, and they're going to try to get you to pay for that. Make sure you're not paying for those jobs that you didn't authorize. And again, doing your homework, checking the Better Business Bureau. If you know someone that you trust, see if you can ask them questions or just go to them. If you are selling, there's also sellers who are getting scammed. So let's say you're selling a product, someone buys it, they tell you, you know what, I'm not happy with it. Can you refund me my money and I'll send you the product back? Well, then you refund them the money and they never send you the product. And so that's how they can scam you that way. Or I've actually even heard of people who will mail back a box with like rocks or something heavy in it. So it seems like you're getting your product back and then it comes back empty. So beware of that too. Friends and family scam. This one's kind of scary. This one also really surprises me with how prevalent it is. So I even still get calls from people who are telling us that this is still happening. And essentially, we actually call this the grandparent scam because it usually targets grandparents. It's going to be someone claiming to be your grandchild. They'll say, "Hey, grandma, it's me, Michael. I just got in a serious accident," or "I just got arrested and I need you to wire transfer me $10,000 right away. I can't explain what's happening right now. Please keep it a secret. Don't tell mom and dad. Don't tell, brother, sister, and I'll fill you in with the details afterwards." So that's kind of the gist of the scam. Please make sure that if there's anyone who ever claims that there's an emergency because of an accident or a legal incident or a medical bill even, that you resist the urge to act immediately. I know it's really scary, but you can contact that person directly who they're claiming to be to make sure that they're okay, or contact another family member who's related to them, more closely related to them, or who would have their whereabouts. Make sure that if you're even slightly skeptical about the money and the nature of the call, that you're just not sending it to them. So they're going to contact you at weird hours, again, ask you to keep it a secret. They're going to request money, and you can also right away ask them questions to verify their identity. So if it's a grandchild and there's something that you've said to them that they would only know the answer to, things like that. So this one's really scary. Definitely bring this up with seniors in your community so that they don't fall for this scam. We've had people calling, basically in tears because they were so terrified. And then sometimes they'll even ask that you pay them with like gift cards and things like that. You can go to the next slide. Friend or foe, this is going to be through social media. So those of you, especially with Facebook, maybe at some point you've received a message from someone on your friends list and it included a link. Maybe they'll say, "Hey, check out this deal. This is an excellent price for this product," whatever, something like that. So keep in mind that your accounts can actually get hacked. And so that's why, again, it's important to update your passwords on social media accounts from time to time, because if it's hacked, they can send a mass message out to your friends list to get them to click on a link. Basically, don't click on any links. That's kind of one thing that we emphasize with this presentation, is if you get a text message or like an email with like a really weird link, don't click on it. Government imposters, this is definitely what you guys see happen again with IRS, Social Security Administration. Those are usually robocalls. I think sometimes I'll get a live person. My coworker who is next to me, has a cubicle next to me. She gets scam calls on her on her work phone. And so she'll kind of ask them like for their employee identification and things like that. So we obviously know it's a scam. If it's a scammer, we just tell people to hang up. And again, it's really difficult to catch these people. You can always file complaints with these scam callers, but again, because they spoof their numbers and because some of them are out of the country, it's extremely difficult to catch them. And the reason why we get so many scam calls is because it's in a cheap, fast, easy way for people to scam people from their hard-earned money, basically. That's why they're so prevalent. Some warning signs. If you're being threatened with arrest or lawsuit, you're not going to get a call from a government agency. If you're ever going to be arrested or if there's a lawsuit, they're not going to call you and tell you that. If you're receiving a phone call or a voicemail telling you that you owe money or to call back immediately, again, scam. So always be skeptical if someone calls you to claim to be from a government entity if you've not made prior contact. So whenever I call people back because they've left a voice message on our community outreach line, everyone is always very skeptical, which I think is kind of a good thing. They'll always ask for my name and where I'm calling from, but that's because they've made prior contact to us. If you've not called the government agency, anytime recently and they're claiming to call from an agency, that's going to be a huge red flag. You can also call her to provide their name, verify what agency they work for, and I would just call that agency directly. instead of continuing the phone call with that person. If you're giving to a charity, make sure that you are researching how much goes to the charity, because sometimes it doesn't always go to the cause that you believe in. Make sure that you're looking up the ratings. You can also check on the Better Business Bureau for charities. And if you guys have probably all heard of GoFundMe at this point. Make sure that it's the original GoFundMe and the one that's going directly to that person or organization, and then it's not going to like a duplicate. So let's say, there is one that you're giving to, and then someone sees that people are donating a lot of money to it. So then they create a duplicate account so that people get confused and they donate to them instead. So be aware of that, and don't pay by gift cards or wire transfer money. If someone is ever asking you to pay with a gift card as a form of payment, that's going to be a scam. That's another one of the new scams that we created in the new presentation, is the gift card one. So if there's anyone telling you to go to Walgreens or CVS and get Google Play cards to pay off your taxes, that's obviously going to be a scam. I've seen people lose tens of thousands of dollars to that, and even just working at the Attorney General's office, I've seen people lose close to like hundreds of thousands of dollars for certain scams. Online dating, this is another big one too, actually. I even believe that this one isn't as reported as frequently as it happens. And I think the reason for that is because people might be embarrassed. So if you know of anyone who is using any online dating sites or meeting people through social media accounts who they might claim to be in a relationship with, essentially what happens is that this person is going to use the promise of love and companionship to trick people into sending them money or to flat out pay their bills for them. So red flags for this is going to be that you meet someone online and they quickly profess really strong feelings for you, like right off the bat. They're going to ask for you to chat with them privately through the chat from that site or through email. And then once you've gained their trust, or if you feel that you actually have feelings for this person, or that, you actually are invested in them, they're going to tell you some elaborate story and then ask for money. It could start off with something small like, hey, I know this is kind of a weird situation to put you in, but I can't pay my phone bill this month. Do you mind helping me out? And then it kind of will escalate from that point on, asking for like plane tickets or paying their rent, things along those lines. This one is really, really, really sad. I've seen seniors who have lost tens of thousands of dollars to this. In fact, I had one time a son called our office on behalf of his mother. They were at the bank with one of the tellers there, and he was essentially like asking me to explain to his mother that she's being scammed by this person that she thinks she's in a relationship with. And she refused to believe it, but he was, bleeding her dry of all of her money. So it's really sad because they're emotionally invested in this person and they don't realize at times it is actually someone who is just completely playing them and who's just trying to take their money. So it's really, really sad to see. They can target widows or, just people in general who, especially our online dating apps. So other red flags is if they could pretend to be someone else. So there's this thing called catfishing. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but it's going to be someone who's pretending to be another person over the internet. This can happen with kids too. This is what cyber predators do. It's that they'll use someone else's picture. They can, literally Google a picture of a 15-year-old, add it to like an Instagram account, and then send a bunch of direct messages to these people and then convince them to meet up with them. So this is kind of what can happen with this scam also, is that someone's going to use someone else's picture and then they pretend to be that person basically. So please make sure that you are aware of that scam and that you're talking to anyone if they're using any online dating sites, because it's really heartbreaking. Tech support scam, this is one of the new scam cards that we've created. This one is also super prevalent. It's going to be basically someone calling, or there might be a pop-up ad. They'll say that they're from Microsoft or another tech company. Usually Microsoft is the one that I hear. And they'll say, hey, your security on your computer is no longer up to date. Please make sure that you are paying us like 150 in order to update it. So that's a huge scam. In fact, when I was in our complaints department, one of our volunteers who was a senior got that scam at work about his personal computer and was literally on the phone about to read his credit card information. Luckily, one of the other volunteers noticed this was happening and got my supervisor at the time. And, we stopped it from happening, but it happens. It's going to, please make sure if there's any security concerns that you have about your device that you're going directly to a business that you trust about it. But don't ever give anyone remote access to your computer. They can steal all of the information that you have on there, use it against you. Make sure you're not giving those people your credit card information, obviously. So steer clear from that. If someone's calling you or claiming that, that your security is no longer up to date and that, you have some support that they're going to provide, that you just go directly to a different business. Phishing, this happens to all of us. So in order to exist as a person at this point, you have to have an email. You have to do it in order to create accounts or to make purchases, things like that. Especially if you're signing up for a lot of sales and things like that, you're going to get a ton of these emails. So I get these pretty frequently. I get them pretty much every single day. I mark them as junk and then I unsubscribe. So if you're finding that you're getting too many emails, make sure you're unsubscribing from those that you don't need. And if there's ever something claiming that you've won a prize, or they're trying to get you to click on a link of some sort, or you could even impersonate a legitimate company or a government agency, that you're keeping in mind that you shouldn't be clicking on these links. So, what's interesting is that they actually will purposefully leave grammatical errors. So if you're getting an email and there's grammatical errors or it sounds really weird, that's going to be a key giveaway that it's going to be some sort of phishing scam. The reason why they leave those grammatical errors is because they know that people who are more likely to overlook those errors are also more likely to fall for scams. So they just leave them. If they're also requesting personal identifying information, name, where you live, things like that, they could use vague headers such as hello customer, hello ma'am, hello sir. And again, they're always going to express urgency for you to turn over payment or sensitive information. Make sure that you're not clicking on those links. Be aware of ads and phony news links, and take a closer look at the sender. Moving scams. This is one where they're called these hostage loads, and it is illegal here in Arizona. Basically what happens is that, let's say you're moving houses, or someone who's moving, and the movers give you a really lowball quote. And then once they have all of your possessions in their, moving trucks, they're going to actually tell you that you owe them more. And so they're going to hold all of your stuff hostage. Again, making sure that you're checking the reviews for these businesses before you go with them, and that you're getting everything in writing. So the estimated price in writing. If they're refusing to do so, don't go with them. And they'll also have a contract that's not provided prior to loading. Ways to protect yourself: make sure that you're researching the companies again, and that you're getting the estimates in writing, and that you're reading the contracts before you're signing them. And then if you can possibly move those really valuable loads yourself, then that's a good idea. Let's see what else. Make sure that you're present for the move. And then if the mover is demanding more money, you can call law enforcement. Lottery, sweepstakes. If you're winning a prize that you've never joined, or if there's the Nigerian prince that we were just talking about, Maya, if there's someone claiming that you've won Publishers Clearinghouse, and again, you've not entered any of these sorts of things, those are all going to be scams. This is super, super prevalent. Red flags are going to be if you're asked to send money, even though you won a prize. They might ask you for like a retainer fee or a fee in order to get the rest of the money. If they're claiming it's a limited window for you to get the prize. If it's based in a foreign country, there's a Spanish one that's super popular. If they're asking you for bank account information, and if they're again asking you for gift cards or to send money orders. So never ever pay money to claim a prize that you have won that you've never entered in. And you're not going to win a foreign lottery. Don't disclose sensitive information. And again, you can always research reputable lotteries and report these scams. So sending money, wire transfers, and gift cards, those are going to be signs that you could potentially be a victim of a scam if that's how they're asking for their form of payment. And guess what? If you pay with either of these ways and it's a scam, you're most likely not ever going to see that money back. Home repair fraud. This is another super popular one that we see, especially because it's so pricey. Before you do any home repairs, or if there's like a new AC unit that you need, things like that, you need to make sure that you're checking with the Better Business Bureau, but also check with the Register of Contractors. So in Arizona, there's a Register of Contractors. You can search the business, make sure that they are legitimate and they are registered with them. I understand that sometimes there's people who freelance this type of stuff and it's cheaper, but in the event that you do have to file a complaint because you're not happy with the job that they've done or it's broken down already, it's going to be very difficult for you to file a complaint against them if they're not registered. So if they're ever asking for money up front, if they're coming to your door and they're saying that you need repairs for X, Y, and Z, that they have supplies left over from a previous job, they're going to, again, lowball you a really low quote, but then they're going to charge you extra once it's done. So please make sure that if it's some unsolicited contractor that you're going with someone else, if they're charging for an estimate or a fee in advance, and if they're also expressing urgency that you need repairs immediately. So don't pay for the entire job before it's been completed. Ask for everything in writing, like with everything else, warranties, estimates, references, and then pay with a credit card. Door-to-door sales, I don't really see this one happen so much anymore, but what I heard is that the one that sticks out to me previously is there was a couple where there was someone who came to their door and was selling a vacuum cleaner. It was really expensive. It was like a couple of grand. This person ended up manipulating their way inside of this, these people's house. And they were there for 4 hours. They refused to leave until they bought the vacuum, essentially. So they filed a complaint and they were able to get their money back, luckily. But make sure that you steer clear from them in general. Post a no soliciting sign on your front door if you're getting tons of people come up to your door. Make sure you're researching the product first. Again, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Don't pay in advance. If there's someone coming to your door without prior, contact to their arrival, don't let them in, don't talk to them. They can become really aggressive. They can steal your identity through these skimmers. These are just pictures of skimmers. So basically on the left side, that's going to be the card reader. It's the skimmer that's going to read all of the digits that you're sliding with your card that you're paying with. And they can do this by putting it inside of where the gas card, reader is going to be. The best ways to kind of avoid this is go to places where maybe there's like an attendant there, or, there's a lot of traffic coming in and out. If it's like a sketchy gas station in the middle of nowhere, that might be kind of a little bit of a red flag. Pay with cash, or if you have a credit card, pay that way also. It's difficult to tell when there are skimmers. The police officer at Prescott Valley said you can kind of like shake it before you put your card in, and then it should pop right out. I know if you're not comfortable doing that, then you don't have to. So I think that there's a lot of gas stations that are doing a better job of doing that. Oh, you can skip that, and you can skip that. Yeah, this is perfect. These are going to be the resources that I want to leave you with. The first one is our office. Please make sure you're jotting this number down. Maybe you don't need it now, but again, I know so many people who are in a situation where they have to file a complaint, even my friends, where I've literally told them I'll file a complaint for them. It's really easy to do. You can call one of those numbers. It doesn't matter which one. I know there's a Tucson one, but it literally goes to a queue, so you can just as likely get someone from the Phoenix office. It makes no difference. So call, ask for a complaint form, ask if you should file a complaint, and then they can also tell you what other agencies you can go through if you need. Go to our website. It's azag.gov. It's really easy. AZ as in Arizona, AG as in Attorney General.gov. And then you can file a complaint there, or you can look at our information for community outreach, see what we do. Federal Trade Commission, they have really good information. And then Better Business Bureau, I've brought them up quite a few times. Please make sure you're always verifying with them before you make purchases, especially from businesses that you've never gone through before or if you've never heard of them before. Checking your credit report, you guys probably do that already, but if you haven't done it in a while, check with any of these three major agencies, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. And that's pretty much going to be it. If you want to go to the last slide. This is going to be community outreach's information, and they are, we'll go ahead and answer those questions and whatnot if you have any.
Thank you, Tiffany. You included so much information there. There's so much for people to be aware of, for sure. I did have a question come in asking about ways you might be notified of some fraud alert. For instance, credit card companies are pretty good. They usually do text you a general alert notice if something was to come through on your card. But is there what would you receive? Would there be like some sort of reporting agency that might notify you of fraud that you should be aware of, and where would that information come from?
So it really depends on maybe like even your credit card company. I know the credit card agent or the credit agencies, they do have like those fraud alerts. I would just encourage you calling them and asking them what they suggest so that you're aware of those situations, because they do have those alerts and whatnot.
Okay. And then, we're seeing a lot more, I think, with our cell phones these days. A lot of texts are coming through that appear to be extremely fraudulent. When you get these text messages, the question is, should you reply stop, or do you just delete them? I think people are afraid, of course, do you respond or not respond to those that you feel are some sort of a scam?
So if it's usually one of those that are saying reply stop, as long as it doesn't have like a link and there's not a bunch of weird like characters and things like that. I actually just got like a scam text message a couple of days ago. It had a bunch of grammatical errors and it had a link. So don't text anything to those numbers. If it's one that's where it's like, I get a lot of the political ones, for instance, it'll say just reply stop. I do just hit stop and then I stop getting those. Yeah.
Okay. And I think also I do a big thing with blocking. So on my cell phone, I'm able to block some of those numbers that are coming through, especially if I'm not sure if I should hit the link or, not the link, but, whether I should reply back. I've oftentimes just blocked the number so that I don't get any more and I delete it.
Same.
Somebody did say that they've had had an experience with a family scam. They received an emergency text from a friend of theirs in England who needed money, and her purse and credit cards were stolen. The only problem that nobody figured out was that the friend was actually deceased. So that was a big red flag to this person to not respond to that. So yeah, I think just being aware of your surroundings and just knowing, just to really stop and think is always important. So those are all the questions I've had today. I just want to thank you so much, Tiffany. This was great. Really, I encourage everybody to look up any information that they have. Stay vigilant as far as scams and frauds. There are certainly a lot of different tactics that are being used these days. So it was really great to learn more about them. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you all for joining and for listening.